The story begins with a salaryman named Denisuke, who works for a big company. He tries to do his best to climb the corporate ladder, but his superiors don't acknowledge his efforts. He gets notified that he's being transferred one day, so he starts working overseas, but he realizes that the workers aren't doing their jobs, so he tells his boss that they need more resources, but his request is immediately rejected. So he starts to lose hope, but he decides to do his best, and after some time, he realizes that the workers are following his lead. He's overjoyed seeing this, and everything's starting to go well, but his boss suddenly calls him, and he gets assigned to another country. So he falls into despair, as he realizes that he has become a corporate slave, but Bike-kun suddenly crashes into him. We cut to a dark castle, where the Demon King summons his elite generals known as the Big Four. The first member is a girl named Yulmandra, and she's considered as the master of flames. The next general is called Ginomi, and she specializes with earth magic, while the third member, Sylphid, is the master of wind. The Demon King summons the fourth general, saying he's from another realm, and he's worthy to become the guardian deity of water. But we see that it's Denisuke, and he has no idea what's happening. The Demon King greets him, saying he wants him to serve as his general, but Denisuke becomes even more confused. So the Demon King reveals that he knows everything about him, telling Denisuke that he's a perfect fit for the demon army because he was an excellent employee. He's glad that the Demon King recognizes his work, but he doesn't want to work for him because he thinks a human shouldn't join the demon army. But the Demon King mentions how much he'll be paid, and he'll even have his own office where everyone will recognize him as the boss. So he realizes that the offer is too good to refuse, and the Demon King offers to return him to his world if he isn't interested, so he notes that the Demon King is actually a chill guy. But he recalls how his superiors never appreciated his efforts, and he mentions that he isn't worthy of the position. But the Demon King tells him to forget everything his superiors told him because they're all idiots. He knows that Denisuke is diligent because he watched him work overseas, and he promises to help him reach his full potential, telling him he believes in him. Denisuke is about to make his decision, but Yulmandra suddenly interrupts him, thinking he doesn't have what it takes to be in the Big Four, and the other members agree with her. So the Demon King decides to test his abilities, and he freaks out because he doesn't know how to fight. But Yulmandra thinks he has special powers, so she tells him to defend himself as she attacks him with her death kick. But the Demon King protects him, telling her he passed out because of the energy wave, so everyone realizes that he's just an ordinary human. The Demon King tells them it's true, but he still thinks Denisuke should be in the Big Four, and Yulmandra thinks it's unacceptable. Ginomi mentions that the demon army is full of evil spirits, and they're always fighting against the demi-humans, so she thinks Denisuke wouldn't last a day. But the Demon King reveals that he values Denisuke's intelligence, and he suddenly regains consciousness, but he panics because he was almost killed by Yulmandra's death kick. But the Demon King tells him to calm down, saying he has chosen the perfect test for him. He reveals that the demon army is trying to ally with the other races, but they're struggling to negotiate with the Minotaurs. He tells Denisuke that his test is to handle the negotiations and make the Minotaurs a part of the demon army, but he freaks out because he knows that it's an extremely difficult task. After that, Yulmandra leads Denisuke to the chief of the Minotaurs, but she's confident that he won't pass the test, and he thinks she's right because there's nothing special about him. But he recalls that the Demon King believes in him, so he decides to do his best anyway. He's about to meet the Minotaur chief, but Yulmandra tells him that Minotaurs are brutal, so he needs to be careful if he doesn't want to die. He sees the Minotaur chief named Terius, and he freaks out as he realizes that it can kill him in an instant. He thinks he isn't strong enough to handle the negotiations, so Yulmandra decides to help him, and she starts talking to Terius. But she suddenly becomes upset because she doesn't understand what he wants, and Denisuke realizes that she's terrible at negotiating. They leave Terius in his room, and she tells Denisuke that the Minotaurs were excited to join the demon army. But whenever she talks to Terius, he keeps saying no, and he even scattered trash around his room, so she thinks there's something wrong with him. She tells Denisuke to take care of everything, and he starts wandering around the hallway as he wonders how he's supposed to talk to Terius. He imagines himself drinking in a bar as he thinks about what to do next. He recalls the moment when he negotiated with a man who kept saying no, and the situation seemed hopeless, so he thought about giving up, but he was able to make him change his mind. He leaves the bar, and he returns to the hallway, as he mentions that he has an idea. Yomandra reports to the Demon King, telling him Terius won't change his mind, and she thinks Denosuke will fail the test, but the Demon King tells her they should wait and see what happens. She returns to Denosuke, who's gathering the straw, and she asks him what he's doing. So he tells her he will talk to Terius, and she thinks it's impossible to negotiate with him, but Denosuke tells her they shouldn't give up so easily. He thinks the negotiation isn't going well because of a cognitive gap, so they need to work to gain Terius's trust. He tells her he will take care of everything, as she realizes that his expression has changed, and he goes to talk to Terius. The next day, Yomandra realizes that Denosuke still hasn't left the room, and she starts looking for him, but she sees that the room is full of trash, so she thinks the negotiation didn't go well. He greets her, but she scolds him for making a mess, and she wonders why Terius isn't there. So Denosuke reveals that he's talking to the Demon King because he has agreed to join the demon army, and she can't believe it, wondering how Denosuke was able to change his mind. So he leads her to Terius, and he explains that she didn't understand him. He tells her about the moment he talked to a foreign executive who kept saying no during their negotiations. But their talk became emotional, and the man suddenly offered to shake his hand. He explains that the man saw being passionate and having an argument as a positive thing, saying there are countries where emotional discussions have more value than a measured one. She realizes that this is the cognitive gap he was talking about, and he mentions that Terius decided to talk to him after their eyes met. He adds that minotaurs sleep on straw when they travel, so when she removed the straw from Terius's room, he had no choice but to sleep on the floor. So he was sleep deprived when he was talking to her, which explains why he was so grumpy. She realizes that she should have considered his perspective when she was talking to him, but he tells her they're both to blame, and he apologizes for being rude to her. He thanks Denosuke for helping them with the negotiations, and he leaves the castle, as everyone bids him farewell. The Demon King tells Denosuke that he has passed the test, so he's now a member of the Big Four. The Demon King tells him to raise his right arm, and he gives him a bracelet, telling him it's the mark of office for being in the Big Four. He tells Denosuke he shouldn't be afraid just because he's new, telling him to continue working based on his ideas and beliefs. Yomandra tells him to raise his arm again, and their bracelets meet. She tells him she has accepted him as one of them, but she mentions that she still doesn't consider him as a full-fledged member of the Big Four. We see Denosuke in his office, where he looks at the organizational chart, and he notes that the command structure is perfect. He thinks about introducing himself to the other members of the Big Four, so he visits Sylphid's room. But his assistant named Belinda reveals that he hasn't been there for a long time, and she promises to tell him about Denosuke before shutting the door. Yomandra approaches him, telling him that the Demon King is looking for him because he wants to give him a new task. So they head to the Demon King, who orders Denosuke to negotiate with the ogres. He explains that the ogres have a large influence on other demi-humans, and in terms of military strength, they're as powerful as the demon army, so the surrounding races look up to them. He thinks they're a threat, but he wants them to join the demon army, and he tells Denosuke to handle the negotiations. Yomandra decides to join him because she wants to protect him, saying she'll be worried if he talks to the ogres alone. After that, Yomandra tells Denosuke they should work as a team, and he thinks they should visit Genomi because she leads the demi-human troops in the demon army. So he thinks she can help them with the ogres, but Yomandra doesn't want to see her, so she tells him she needs to make plans before they leave. We see Genomi training the demi-humans, and she notes that they were able to improve, so she tells them they're doing great. She asks Denosuke what he wants to talk about, so he tells her he needs information about the ogres. She realizes that his next mission is to negotiate with them, and she mentions that their leader Ogre is difficult to deal with, saying his enemies have branded him as a tyrant. But she tells Denosuke that her subordinates can't relax, because there's a murderous demon behind him. He realizes that she's talking about Yomandra, and he asks her what she's doing there, so she explains that she has come to pick him up, because he's taking forever. Genomi tells him to leave with her, but she gets angry, wondering why Genomi isn't treating her with respect. We see Denosuke and Yomandra waiting outside the ogre's castle, and Yomandra asks the guards how long they need to wait, so the guards mention that they're still waiting for Ogre to let them enter. A girl apologizes for making them wait, and she tells them to follow her, saying they have been given permission to enter. The girl leads them to Ogre, and Yomandra greets him, but he tells her to remain silent, saying she isn't allowed to talk without